بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. To proceed, inshallah we will go over. This will be a little bit different from the usual classes. I'll tell you how it will be different. But inshallah, in the next 3 sessions that we have together, we'll go over as much of this book as we can cover, inshallah. This is Ibn Qayyim's book, Patience and Gratitude. It is a translation, it is like an abridged translation from Uddat al-Sabirin wa Zakhirat al-Shakirin, or it's an abridged translation from Uddat al-Sabirin wa Zakhirat al-Shakirin, or Idat al-Sabirin wa Zakhirat al-Shakirin. So the name of the book itself can be said in two ways. Idat al-Sabirin. Ida means what? From wa'ada, ya'idu, wa'adan, wa'adallahi, that's the promise. So Idat al-Sabirin, the promise of the patient. So Allah's promise to the patient. Idat al-Sabirin, Allah's promise to the patients, to the patient. Wa Zakhiratu Shakirin, and Zakhira is what? Is the assets of Shakirin, the grateful. Or you could also say that Zakhira would be the tool, the armamentarium of the Shakirin, or the grateful. So Zakhira is basically the assets of the grateful. And we will, see how patience and gratitude are linked together. Patience and gratitude are linked together. So if you say Idatul Sabirin, it will mean the promise of the patient. And if you say Uddatul Sabirin, it will be the tools of the patient. The tools of the patient. وَذَخِيرَةُ الشَّاكِرِينَ. So this is a book about patience and gratitude. Patience and gratitude. Because patience and gratitude, as we will see in this book, are two different manifestations of faith. Together they comprise all of faith. So faith is divided into 2 halves. Patience is 1 half, and gratitude is the other half, and we will come to see how. Now, we said that this is going to be a little different, because we will want you to be active participants, and we will want you we also want to cover the book, read from the book, so that we could benefit from the author's writing. Although this is an abridged version of the book, but we still could benefit from reading the book together. So I'll ask one of you to read.
I can read.
So we will begin, inshallah, from the author's prologue or introduction of the author, and because it is important that we start by alhamdulillah, wassalam, wassalamu ala nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Author's prologue. Praise be to Allah, the patient, as-sabur, the thankful, as-shakur, the most high, al-ali, the greatest, al-kabir, the hearing, as-sami', the all-seeing, al-basir, the all-knowing, the alim, the all-powerful, al-qadir, whose power controls every single creature and whose will dominates every single event. His call to people to prepare for the hereafter has been made so strongly that even the dead could hear it. I bear witness that there is no God except Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his slave and messenger, the best of his creation, who did not spare any effort to advise his ummah, the most patient in accepting the decree of Allah, and the most grateful for his blessings. Truly he conveyed the message of Allah and proclaimed the truth and endured in the way of Allah that which no human being had ever endured. He followed Allah's commands patiently and gratefully until he gained the pleasure of Allah and attained the highest degree of patience, such as had never before been reached. Patience, or patient perseverance, is obligatory, according to the consensus of the scholars, and it is half of faith, iman, the other half of which is gratitude, shukr. Patience is mentioned in the Quran around 90 times.
So he says patience is mandatory, patience is obligatory. And, someone was asking, why is it that we talk a lot about matters that pertain to the heart? Because there are a lot of rulings for the heart that we are ignorant of, that we overlook. The heart has many rulings, like the body has rulings, the actions of the salah and siyam and hajj, and we pay a lot of attention to those rulings. We often overlook the rulings that pertain to the heart, and there are a lot of rulings. So he started here by saying that this is not like a luxury to talk about patience and to talk about the heart softeners and to talk about purification of the soul. Some of these things are obligatory. Some of these things are essential for one's faith. So by the consensus of the scholars, patience is obligatory. To exercise patience is obligatory. We will come to know that there is the obligatory patience and there is the recommended patience, and there is also patience that is forbidden and patience that is disliked. But we will not be calling it like patience for but in terms of like perseverance. Some of it is disliked, some of it is forbidden. Patience is obligatory when you're being patient with the obligations of Allah. You're enduring to perform the obligations. It takes endurance, right? Or you're persevering in performing the obligations, such as the various obligations that come with some difficulty or some burden, some taklif. A lot of obligations come with taklif or burden. The word taklif itself means burden. Do you know all of us are called mukallaf, right? If you're sane adult Muslim, you're called a mukallaf. And the mukallaf is basically the one who is liable, legally and morally liable in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Taklif means liability. Mukallaf means liable, means responsible. That sane adult Muslim, if you're a sane adult Muslim, then you are mukallaf, liable, responsible. Not only liable and responsible, but also authorized. Because without being a Muslim, you're not authorized to pray. Even though you're required to pray, but you're not authorized. So if you pray, it does not count for you because you're not authorized, even though you are required. And if you don't pray, it will count in your scale of evil deeds. So the mukallaf is the one who is legally and morally authorized and liable, responsible. Taklif comes with a burden. Kallafahu means that he burdened him with a task. He gave him a task which has some burden. Otherwise it will not be called taklif. I will not, if I ask you to basically pass on the phone to me, that is not taklif. But taklif has a little bit of difficulty or mashaqqa or burden that comes with it. But the beauty of the word mukallaf, that's why some of the words we need to basically commit to memory in Arabic, add them to our vocabulary in Arabic, because they have no accurate translation into English. They have no counterpart in the English language. Taklif, the beauty of the word taklif is that it comes from the same root as loved. So kalifa ar-rajulu imra'atahu means that the man loved his wife. Kalifa ar-rajulu imra'atahu means that the man loved his wife. So the three-letter root of the word infers also love, which means what? Which means that you carry out this burden lovingly, that you're lovingly carrying out the burden with which you have been tasked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you're doing it for Allah, so you're doing it lovingly. So al-mukallaf in this case is the one who is burdened with taklif, and he lovingly performs or carries out the obligations of that burden. So here, patience, when you are patient with the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if those decrees are obligatory, then this patience is obligatory. So sometimes, taklif comes as an obligation, like to do taraweeh is not obligatory. To patient yourself through the taraweeh is recommended patience. But to wait for Salat al-Isha and resist sleep until you pray Isha or wake up for Fajr to pray Fajr, that is obligatory. So this patience is obligatory, and the other patience is mustahab. So it varies with that which you're trying to be patient with, that which you're trying to show consistency or you're trying to persevere through. If it is an obligation, then this patience is obligatory. If it is mustahab, then it is mustahab, and so on. But a big part of patience is obligatory, as he said. And the root of patience is obligatory. To exercise patience, perseverance, endurance for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obligatory. Sabr. And inshallah we will talk about how we translate sabr, but I want you, when we come to it, inshallah we will address it in more detail. But I want you to remember that sabr means not only patience, but it means perseverance, endurance, restraint, and consistency. But just if you have to remember three translations, it is perseverance, endurance, and restraint. Go ahead.
Patience or patient perseverance is obligatory according to consensus of scholars, and it is half of faith, iman, the other half of which is gratitude, shukr. Patience is mentioned in the Quran around 90 times. The relation of patience to iman is like the relation of the heart to the body.
So just 1 second. So you said that patience is half of faith, half of iman. How come patience is half of iman when we know that iman is 6 parts? أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر والقدر خيره وشره. To believe in Allah, His angels, His books, messengers, اليوم الآخر, the hereafter, final day, والقدر, predestination. So how could patience be half of faith when faith is 6 parts? Patience is not one of them. Basically, from the angle, Iman as a conviction is those 6 pillars. Iman as a conviction is those 6 pillars. But Iman is not only about the conviction. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِالنَّاسِ لَرَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ, and Allah would have not wasted your Iman, and Allah would have not condemned to banishment your Iman. What Iman is Allah talking about here? Your prayers towards Jerusalem. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ, Allah would have not wasted your prayers towards Jerusalem. So Iman is, the Prophet ﷺ said, Iman بِضْعٌ وَسَبْعُونَ شُعْبًا أَعْلَاهَا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَأَدْنَاهَا إِمَاطَةُ الْأَذَى عَلَى الطَّرِيقِ. Iman is 70 some branches, the highest of which is La ilaha illallah, and the lowest is to remove harm from the road. One of them is belief, faith, action of the heart, and the other one is an action of the body. So from the perspective, from one angle, Iman is 2 parts, patience and gratitude. Which angle is this? This is the angle of your reaction to the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-awamir wal-aqdar. أمر الله القدري وأمر الله الشرعي. How are you responding to أمر الله الشرعي, the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which are the obligations and the prohibitions, and how are you responding to أمر الله القدري, the aqdar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the destiny, predestination, Allah's decrees? How are you responding to news about your failure in the exam, your disease, loss of loved ones? That is your response to Amrullah al-Qadari, to the Qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How are you responding to Allah's command to you to lower your gaze when you're walking in the street? To lower your gaze when you see awrat that you should not be looking at. How are you responding to this? This is not Amr Qadari, this is Amr Shara'i. This is a demand from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, an emphatic demand, meaning an obligation, or in this case, an emphatic prohibition, meaning tahreem, that you should not look. So lower your gaze. How are you responding to this? So your response to the decrees of Allah and the commands of Allah, from this angle, the angle of your response to Allah's decrees and commands, faith is only two parts: patience and gratitude, sabr and shukr, because there are good times and hard times. During the good times, you have to exercise gratitude, and during the hard times, you have to exercise patience. But keep in mind that the predominant taklif during the hard times is the taklif of patience, but there is also gratitude. So it is not like during the hard times there will be no gratitude whatsoever. And it is not that during the good times there will be no patience. No, you will need patience in both times and gratitude in both times, but predominantly you need patience during times of hardship, and you need gratitude during times of ease and comfort, prosperity and luxury. Yes.
Patience is mentioned in the Quran around 90 times. The relation of patience to Iman is like the relation of the head to the body. And the one who has no patience has no Iman. Allah has commanded patience for the believers in the following ayah: Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu ista'inu bis sabri was salat. O you who believe, seek help with patience, perseverance, sabr, and prayer. Patience has also been made a condition for a person's entering paradise and being saved from hellfire on the Day of Judgment. Allah will say, I have rewarded them this day for their patience and constancy. Patience. They are indeed the ones that have achieved bliss. And Allah commended the
إِنِّي جَزَيْتُهُمُ الْيَوْمَ بِمَا صَبَرُوا أَنَّهُمْ هُمُ الْفَائِزُونَ. This is in Surah Al-Mu'minun. I have rewarded them. إِنِّي جَزَيْتُهُمُ الْيَوْمَ بِمَا صَبَرُوا أَنَّهُمْ هُمُ الْفَائِزُونَ. Repeat it in English.
I have rewarded them this day for their patience and constancy. They are indeed the ones that have achieved bliss. And Allah commended the patient, those who have patience, when He said, it is righteousness to be firm and patient in pain or suffering and adversity, and throughout all periods of panic. Such are the people of truth, the God-fearing.
والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. Repeat it in English.
It is righteousness to be firm and patient in pain or suffering and adversity, and throughout all periods of panic. Such are the people of truth and God-fearing. Al-Baqarah. Allah loves those who are firm and steadfast. Inna Allah yuhibbul muttaqeen.
يحب الصابرين.
Inna Allah yuhibbul sabirin.
This is in Surah Ali Imran. Wallahu yuhibbu الصابرين. Wallahu yuhibbu الصابرين. Surah Ali Imran.
Allah has told us that He is with those who have patience. This is a special companionship, ma'iyah, which means ma'iyah, which means that He is protecting and supporting them, which is over and above the ordinary companionship, which applies to believers and disbelievers alike, whereby Allah has knowledge of them and is watching over them. Allah has told us, and be patient and persevering, for Allah is with those who patiently persevere. وَاصْبِرُوا
إِنَّ
وَصَبِرُوا.
اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Now, وَاصْبِرُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ in Surah Al-Anfal. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ وَاصْبِرُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ.
And be patient and persevering, for Allah is with those who patiently persevere.
So the ma'iyya, the companionship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is with us all the time with His hearing and vision, watchfulness. Allah is watching over us. But when Allah says, Inna Allah ma'a sabirin, that He is with the sabirin, He is also with the non-sabirin. He's watching them. He hears, sees, watches. But the ma'iyya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sabirin, this is a ma'iyyat rahma. Ma'iyyat rahma, ma'iyyat hifz, ma'iyyat tadbir, ma'iyyat hirasa, lahum, protection, mercy. This is the ma'iyya, or the companionship of His mercy, His compassion, His protection, that all of this will be with the sabirin.
The Prophet ﷺ told us that patience is all good and full of goodness, and said that there is no gift better than patience. Umar ibn al-Khattab
ما أعطي أحد عطاء خيرا وأوسع من الصبر. ما أعطي أحد عطاء خيرا وأوسع من الصبر. This was reported by Bukhari and Muslim from Abi Sa'id radiallahu anhu. ما أعطي أحد, no one was given anything, عطاء, any gift, خيرا وأوسع من الصبر, that is better than patience.
Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu said, the best days of our lives were ours by virtue of patience. This book has been written to highlight the urgent need for patience and to explain that our happiness in this life and our salvation in the hereafter depend on patience. This book is filled with benefits, and readers will benefit from its advice and teachings. What is good and correct in this book is by the help of Allah, and what is mistaken in it is from the shaitan. May Allah forgive the author and the editor. Allah is the greatest helper, and we put our trust in Him. Chapter 1, the definition of patience. Sabr is an Arabic word which comes from a root meaning to detain, refrain, and stop. There is an expression in Arabic, so-and-so was killed, sabran, which means that he was captured and detained until he died. In the spiritual sense, patience means to stop ourselves from despairing and panicking, to stop our tongues from complaining, and to stop our hands from striking our faces and tearing our clothes at times of grief and stress. What scholars have said about patience.
Okay, so he's talking about the linguistic origin of sabr. And the linguistic origin of sabr, he said mana, to stop, to restrain. And he mentioned that, qutila sabran, that he was killed sabran, meaning that he was imprisoned until he died. Also the Prophet ﷺ naha an al-masbura. The Prophet forbade basically the consumption of the animal that was restrained and shot. Restrained and shot. So sabr is to restrain, to hold back, to withhold. Yamna. So it comes from al-mana, to confine, to restrain. But it also comes from other roots, or the root, the three-lettered root of sabr, which is sad, ba, ra, infers al-mana, which is restraining or confining or keeping back, holding. But it also comes from shidda. It also comes from hardness. It also comes from difficulty. It comes from difficulty because sabr is restrained with difficulty. So it comes from both. And when you say sabira, sabira is a plant that is extremely sour. So it is extremely difficult to eat sabira because it is extremely sour. So it infers this extreme, and it infers this difficulty. You say ardun subur, or a land that is rocky, rubbly, craggy, basically uneven land. It is ardun subur, a land that is hard, unpaved, rocky, and full of rocks and so on. that is ardun sabr. So mana, withholding and confining, and shidda, difficulty. Sabr means both. Sabr also means dhamma, which is togetherness. Because if you have sabr, you will stay together. You will keep yourself together. Basically, you will stay composed because you have sabr. So sabr, the root also comes from dhamm, which is gathering and collecting. So when you say, for instance, subratul ta'am, which is a bundle of, or subratul khudrawat, a bundle of vegetables. The bundle of vegetables is called subra, which comes from bundling, gathering, keeping together. So it has these three different meanings or inferences. Al-mana, which is restraint, shidda, which is difficulty, and also the togetherness, dhamm, which is togetherness. Because you restrain yourself with difficulty, because it is not easy. It is hard. So with difficulty, and you keep yourself together. You stay composed in the face of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that may be unfavorable.
What scholars have said about patience? Some scholars have defined patience as a good human characteristic or a positive psychological attitude, by virtue of which we refrain from doing that which is not good. Human beings cannot live a proper, healthy life without patience. Abu Uthman said, "The one who has patience is the one who has trained himself to handle difficulties." Amir ibn Uthman al-Maliki said, "Patience means to keep close to Allah and to accept calmly the trials He sends, without complaining or feeling sad." Al-Khawwas said, "Patience means to adhere." Al-Khawwas said, "Patience means to adhere to the rules of the Quran and the Sunnah." Another scholar said, "Patience means to refrain from complaining." Ali ibn Abi Talib said, radiyallahu anhu, "Patience means to seek Allah's help." Is it better to have patience at a time of difficulty, or to be in a situation which just does not require patience? Abu Muhammad al-Hariri said, "Patience means not seeing any difference between times of ease and times of hardship, and being content at all times." I, Ibn al-Qayyim, said, say this is too difficult, and we are not instructed to be like this. Allah has created us in such a way that we feel the difference between times of ease and times of hardship. And all that we can do is refrain from panicking at times of stress. Patience does not mean feeling the same at both easy and difficult times. That is beyond us and is not part of our nature. Having an easy time is better for us than having a difficult time. As the Prophet ﷺ said in this well-known hadith, in a well-known dua, "If you are not angry with me, then I do not care what happens to me. But still I would rather have your blessings and favor." This does not contradict the hadith which says, "No one has ever been given a gift better than patience." A better gift than patience. Because that refers to a time that a test or trial has befallen a person, but ease is still better.
Ease is better. This is a very good example of when we hear like a statement from one of our righteous predecessors. Those that are righteous are, of our great predecessors, the Imams and the Mujtahideen and so on. We always have to treat them with great respect. But it does not mean that every statement will have to be taken at face value, or will not be basically counter-checked or checked against the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. While maintaining all respect to the sayer, the saying will have to be examined. And if it was not, in accordance with the way of the Prophet ﷺ, or it sounds to be unattainable or extreme, then we do not have to accept it. So when Abu Muhammad al-Hariri rahimahullah says patience is to have no difference between times of ease and times of hardship, is this human? No, it's not human. Did the Prophet ﷺ laugh and was he happy at times and sad at times? Yes, he was. Allah said to him, قَدْ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُ يَحْزُنُكَ الَّذِي يَقُولُونَ. We know that you are saddened by what they say. So he was saddened by their rejection. And at times he rejoiced. It is not natural to think that the Prophet ﷺ felt the same way after the victory of Badr and after the defeat of Uhud and after the death of Hamza radiallahu anhu. He did not. He felt different. So patience is not to be indifferent to the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but patience is to restrain yourself from complaining. It is to restrain yourself from rejection. It is to restrain yourself from resenting the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the decree of Allah. Even though you dislike it, you dislike pain and suffering, and human beings naturally dislike pain. They naturally dislike defeat. They naturally dislike failure. They naturally dislike loss. You will dislike it. You will dislike the thing itself. But as the decree of Allah, you're accepting it without any resentment in your heart and with complete surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to the decree. You're not surrendering to the defeat. You're surrendering to Allah's decree. But then you will try to get, to move beyond the defeat. You will try to counter it with whatever means you can. But you are accepting Allah's decree without a show of resentment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with complete surrender to His decree. Do you see the difference between not surrendering to the decree? Umar said, نُنَازِعُ الْأَقْدَارَ بِالْأَقْدَارِ. We counter the decrees by decrees because you know that this was decreed. Whatever happened in the past is decreed. But don't surrender to it. Like if you got defeated at the beginning of the battle, it does not mean that you say, well, it looks like Allah wants us to get defeated. You still continue to strive and you still continue to succeed in your attempts. You're not surrendering to the decree, but you're surrendering to the commander of that decree. You're saying, I accept what you decree, but then I don't know what you have decreed for me in tomorrow or the next hour or the next minute. So I'll try to resist that decree. I got like cancer. I will fight it as much as I can. I'll fight the cancer as much as I can. But I am accepting that you had given me cancer. I accepted you're giving me cancer. I will now fight cancer as much as I can without resentment of Allah's decree, with acceptance and without resentment. But the acceptance of His decree that He gave you cancer does not mean that you will surrender to the cancer itself. Yes. Yes. إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ بِكَ عَلَيَّ غَضَبٌ فَلَا أُبَالِي. This is the dua that the Prophet ﷺ made on his way out of Ta'if after he was rejected by the people of Ta'if. Allah said, the Prophet ﷺ made this dua in which he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you have no anger, if you're not angry with me, then I don't care of what I endured or what I endured. But then the Prophet ﷺ said, وَلَكِنَّ عَافِيَتَكَ أَوْسَعُ لِي. But your ni'mah, your afiyah means basically safety from all hardships. Safety from psychological, physical, financial hardship. It is to be given safety, to be given security, to be protected from all hardships. That is what afiyah means. Afiyah is financial, psychological, physical afiyah. Afiyah, the physical afiyah is health. Financial afiyah is prosperity. Afia of the mind is the peace of mind, contentment, and so on.
Patience and shakwa, complaint. Shakwa falls into two categories. The first type means to complain to Allah, and this does not contradict patience. It is demonstrated by several of the prophets. For example, when Yaqub ﷺ said, I only complain of my distraction and anguish to Allah. إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Earlier, Yaqub ﷺ said, Sabrun Jamil, which means patience is most fitting for me. The Quran also tells us about Ayyub ﷺ, and remember Ayyub Job, when he cries to his Lord, truly distress has seized me. Allahumma inni massani ad-durra
وأنت أرحم الراحمين رب إني مسني الضر وأنت أرحم الراحمين.
The epitome of patience, the Prophet ﷺ prayed to his Lord, O Allah, I complain to you of my weakness and helplessness. Musa ﷺ prayed to Allah saying, O Allah, all praise is due to you, and complaint is made only to you, and you are the only one from whom we seek help and in whom we put our trust, and there is no power except by your help. The second type of complaint involves...
Okay, so the first type of complaint, patience, there is beautiful patience. You see, Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam in Surah Yusuf, when they told them that Yusuf was eaten by the wolf, what did he say? He said, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ وَاللَّهُ الْمُسْتَعَانُ عَلَى مَا تَصِفُونَ وَجَاءُوا عَلَى قَمِيصِهِ بِدَمٍ كَذِبٍ قَالَ بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ وَاللَّهُ الْمُسْتَعَانُ عَلَى مَا تَصِفُونَ فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. Then let it be beautiful patience. That is what Yaqub alayhi salam said. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ, let my patience be beautiful patience. صَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. Because there is sabr jameel and sabr غير jameel, or sabr qabih. Sabr jameel is the sabr without complaining. Sabr, because all people eventually will have to endure. Because you can't change the decrees of Allah. So you will have to endure them. But the sabr al-jameel is sabr without complaining, without resentment. He said, فَصَبْرٌ jameel. But then he said, إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. I complain only to Allah. Which means that complaining to Allah is not counter to beautiful patience. It is not the complaining that is counter to beautiful patience. It is complaining to the people that is counter to beautiful patience. As one of the poets said, لَا تَشْكُوَنَّ إِلَى الْعِبَادِ فَإِنَّمَا تَشْكُو الرَّحِيمَ إِلَى الَّذِي لَا يَرْحَمُ. Do not complain to the ibad, for when you complain to the ibad, you're complaining to the one who's merciless against the one who's most merciful. Yeah, but when you complain to the ibad about the decrees of Allah, you're complaining to merciless ibad against the merciful Allah. فَإِنَّمَا تَشْكُو الرَّحِيمَ إِلَى الَّذِي لَا يَرْحَمُ. لَا تَشْكُوَنَّ إِلَى الْعِبَادِ. Don't complain to the ibad. فَإِنَّمَا, for when you do that, تَشْكُو الرَّحِيمَ إِلَى الَّذِي لَا يَرْحَمُ. You're complaining against the most merciful to those who have no mercy. So now, then he will talk about how complaining to the people is counter to beautiful patience. Complaining to Allah is not. You make dua, you ask Allah, Rabbi inni massani ad-durr wa anta arhamur rahimin. Oh Allah, I have been touched by hardship, I have been touched by harm, and you are the most merciful of all those who are merciful, like dua Sayyidina Ayyub and dua Sayyidina Yunus. La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin. So you complain to Allah, but you don't complain to the people. Yes, go ahead.
The second type of complaint involves complaining to people, either directly through our words or indirectly through the way we look and behave. This is contradictory to patience. Opposing forces. Psychologically speaking.
So if you complain to the people, it's contradictory to patience. But what about when the Prophet ﷺ used sometimes to vent out to people? Didn't he vent out to Umar and Abu Bakr and Salama? If you vent out when you know that there is someone trustworthy that could relieve your distress by wise words, or could provide you solutions, or could help you out in the face of your hardship, then that is not complaining to them. That is seeking their help in that which they have power over. So if I go and say to my wife, well, this and that happened to me at work today, seeking her, basically consoling me, or didn't the Prophet do this with Salama when the Sahaba refrained from shaving their heads after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and the Prophet ﷺ felt sad that the Sahaba are not obeying his command to shave their heads, and he went and confided into Salama, and then Salama advised him to go out and shave his head, and everybody will follow suit if he does, and he did. And they shaved their heads. So this is not complaining. This is basically seeking the counsel, seeking the counsel, the good counsel, seeking the help of people in that which they could help. You can't go to like a lay person and tell them, I don't have kids. I need your help so that I could have kids. That is beyond their capacity, and this would be shirk. This would be shirk. But if you go to like a physician who specializes in fertility, and you tell them this is my condition and so on and so forth, that is within their capacity, so that is permissible. So you seek the good counsel of the people, you seek the help of the people within their power. Within their power. If you seek help from the people in matters that are outside their power, then that could be even a form of shirk. You don't go to someone and you tell them, I need to go to Jannah. He has no power over this. But you could ask them to help you out. Can you give me a cup of water, for instance, or something. Still, despite the fact that this is permissible to ask the people for things within their capacity, within their reach, within their power, Ubadah ibn Samit tells us that Bayan Rasulullah sallallahu على السمع والطاعة في العسر واليسر والمنشط والمكره وألا ننازع الأمر أهله وألا نسأل الناس شيئا. Or part of the hadith of the bay'ah, or the pledge of allegiance that they used to give to the Prophet ﷺ when they accepted Islam, according to some narrations, وَأَلَّا نَسْأَلَ النَّاسَ شَيْئًا, and to not ask anything of anyone, not ask people for anything. لَا نَسْأَلَ النَّاسَ شَيْئًا, to not ask the people for anything. The Sahaba took this to heart to the extent that if they were on top of their horse, they had mounted their horse, and something falls from their hand on the ground, they would not ask anyone to pick it up and hand it to them. They would come down, pick it up, and then mount their horse one more time, because they took that advice of the Prophet ﷺ to heart, وَأَلَّا نَسْأَلَ النَّاسَ شَيْئًا, and to not ask anything from the people. And that is like a sign of reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whenever possible, and if it will not cause you harm, certainly we do need the people, we need to ask the people for help whenever we need to. But if you could do it yourself, do it yourself. That is the gist of that advice of the Prophet ﷺ. Whenever you could do it yourself, do it yourself. Don't ask people to do it for you. Do it yourself. If you need someone to help you out, then go. There is no harm in asking the people to help you out. But anything that you could do yourself, it's a sign of reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sign of integrity of one's character. Yes.
Opposing forces. Psychologically speaking, every person has two forces that work within him or her. One is the driving force, which pushes him towards some actions, and the other is the restraining force.
So قوة إقدام وقوة إحجام. The driving force is قوة إقدام, and the restraining force is قوة إحجام. And basically he will tell us here that people have, the best of people are the people who have the driving force and the restraining force. The driving force is the force that will help you, that will push you, that will propel you to do good and to be active, to feed the poor, to help the needy, to pray the night prayers, to wake up and fast, to go to work and do everything. That's called driving force. You're doing all of this stuff. You have قوة إقدام. You're doing the ta'at, all the ta'at. Whenever you're invited to something good, you rush to it. If they're going out to feed the hungry, you're with them. If there is a janaza, you're following the janaza. If there is time, أذكار الصباح والمساء, you don't miss out on أذكار الصباح والمساء. You finish your adhkar, there is a halaqa, you stay with for the knowledge. That is قوة إقدام. And قوة الإحجام is to restrain from that which Allah prohibited. It is to be able to lower your gaze when you're walking out on the street, and it is to be able to stay away from the muharram of Allah. It is to be able to stay away from haram money. That is restraining force, قوة إحجام. This haram money that is accessible to you, and you could take it, but you restrain yourself from it. People vary. Some people have both. Those are the best of people. And some people have none, neither, and those are the worst of people. And some people have more of one than the other. They have the ability to do a lot of good things, but they're weak in front of temptations. In the face of temptations, they are weak, and they fall for the temptations. And there are those people that are strong in the face of temptations, or they have the ability to restrain themselves, but they are weak in their driving force. They don't do much. They don't do much that is good or bad. They're just not doing much. And there are those people that do much good, but they still do bad, because they have this driving force, قوة الإقدام, but they don't have much of the restraining force, قوة الإحجام. And the best person of all is the one who has both the driving force and restraining force. Yes?
I was just going to ask if there was, among the two, is there one that's better than the other? And the one that was...
هل الأحب إلى الله فعل الطاعات أو ترك المحرمات? That's a debate between the scholars. What is more beloved to Allah? The performance of the ta'at or the refraining from the muharramat? Some of the people may say it is refraining from the muharramat, because the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ وَمَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ. Whenever I command you to do something, do of it as much as you could, and whenever I prohibit you from something, abstain. He did not say abstain from as much as you could. He just said abstain, refrain, stop. So there is more, the demand to refrain from muharramat is more emphatic. But this is basically because everybody could refrain from the muharramat, but not everybody could do all can perform all the commands. Some people, a lot of people may not be able to fast, may not be able to pay zakah because they don't have money, may not be able to go to hajj because they are unhealthy, may not be able. So, awamir, but ultimately, فعل الطاعات is more beloved to Allah than ترك المحرمات. The performance of good deeds is more beloved to Allah than refraining from bad deeds. Because فعل الطاعات is a characteristic of the believers, is a special characteristic of the believers that is not shared by the non-believers. But tark al-muharramat, even the non-believers, sometimes they refrain from muharramat. Not all the non-believers, so the non-believers, not all of them are, they commit haram. Some of them are married, and some of them are, they don't steal, and they don't do much of that which is haram. But it is only the believers that pray. It is only the believers that fast. It is only the believers that do these things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a hallmark, a signature characteristic of the believers. فعل الطاعة. That is why it is more beloved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Patience essentially harnesses the driving force to push us towards good things and the restraining force to hold us back from actions that may be harmful to ourselves or others. Some people have strong patience when it comes to doing what is good for them, but their patience is weak with regard to restraint from harmful actions. So we may find that a person has enough patience to perform acts of worship, salah, sawm, hajj, but has no patience in controlling himself and refraining from following his whims and desires. And in this way we may commit haram deeds. Conversely, some people may have strong patience in abstaining from forbidden deeds, but their patience in obeying commandments and performing ibadah is too weak. Some people have no patience in either case, and needless to say, the best people are those who possess both types of patience. So, a man may have plenty of patience when it comes to standing all night in prayer and enduring whatever conditions of heat or cold may be prevalent, but no patience at all when it comes to lowering his gaze and refraining from looking at women. Another may have no problem in controlling his gaze, but he lacks the patience which would make him enjoin the good and forbid the evil. And he is so weak and helpless that he cannot strive against the kuffar and mushrikun. Most people will be lacking in patience in any one case, and a few lack it in all cases. Further definition of patience. A scholar said, to have patience means that one's common sense and religious motives are stronger than one's whims and desires. Can I repeat that?
I just want to tell you one thing that is important. We have about 2 more pages to read, so it will take about half an hour or more. I will not be offended at all if you leave at any time if you have any engagements, but I will continue until we finish the 2 pages.
A scholar said, to have patience means that one's common sense and religious motives are stronger than one's whims and desires.
Okay, let's rephrase this, because the scholar said ثبات داعي العقل والدين في مقابلة داعي الطبع والشهوة. ثبات داعي العقل والدين في مقابلة داعي الطبع والشهوة. Thabat is what? It is withstanding. It is steadfastness. Steadfastness of da'i al-aql wa din. The da'i is the caller. Da'iya, caller, preacher, caller. The da'i, the caller of al-aql, reason, wa din. Let's translate this as piety for ease. So the steadfastness of the caller of reason, aql, wa din, piety, in the face of the caller or against the caller of tab', natural instincts, wa shahwa, and desires. Natural instincts and desires. Natural instincts, or we could even call this natural indisposition, but the reason why I don't want to call it natural indisposition is that we use this translation for fitra. And fitra has positive connotations, not negative connotations. But tab', which is your natural instincts, has positive and negative connotations. It could be your tab', you could be easygoing. You could be easygoing and stingy. Someone else may be brave and aggressive. Bravery is good, aggression is bad. Or they may be forbearing, but coward. So it's a combination of things. Your tab', your natural inclination, is very is different from fitra. When we speak about fitra, we speak about the tab' or the nature in the positive connotation only. So when we speak about the nature of the natural indisposition of humanity to worship the one Lord alone, to worship God alone, that would be al-fitra. So it is part of the tab', but it is not all of your tab', because tab' is everything that basically was installed in you. So Umar and Abu Bakr, they have different tab', right? They have different natural indispositions. But both of them were able to control their tab' and tame their tab' until their tab' became in accordance with the divine will and the divine decrees and commands. So, but they started out from very different places. One was always, even before Islam, Abu Bakr was always the kind and quiet and calm and composed and, gentle. Umar, the strong, the brave, sometimes overbearing person. And so they are coming from two different places, two different tab'as, but they were able to control their tab'as until they brought them under control and in accordance with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the liking of Allah. So Abu Bakr became this brave and daring person during Hurub al-Ridda, wars of the apostates. And Umar became this very gentle and tender person during his rulership, dealing with the weak and the poor of his ra'iyah or of his subjects. He is extremely tender, extremely gentle. So both of them were able to bring their tab' under control. So here, the scholar that said this was al-Ghazali rahimahullah. He said, ثبات داعي العقل والدين, the collar of reason. Inside you, there is a collar that tells you, stick to reason, adhere to reason. Reason, is good. Being reasonable, common sense, reason is good. And adhere to piety, adhere to your deen. And then there is another collar that comes from your natural instincts that will tell you, oh, she's such a beautiful woman. She's flirting with you, you should reciprocate. That is the natural instinct, the tab', da'i al-tab' wal-shahwa. It is natural for men and women to have this attraction to each other. So it is natural if a woman, like a beautiful woman, is flirting with a man, it is natural for this man to reciprocate. That is the collar of your natural instinct, the collar of your shahwa, of your lust or your desires. But da'i al-aql, the collar of reason and deen, piety. Keep in mind, that is not even only the collar of piety, but the collar of reason also. Because a reasonable man who has integrity and has honor, even if they are not Muslim, they will say, yeah, but I'm married. I do not want my wife to do this, so I should not do it either. So the collar of reason is not to be ignored, because the reason that Allah had given you is good, as long as this reason is not defiant of the deen. Once it starts to defy the deen, then it is bad, then it's corrupted reason. So every time you are being called by the da'i al-shahwa, the collar of shahwa or lust or desires, da'i al-tab', the collar of your natural instincts. My natural instinct when, if Yusuf for instance, punched me, my natural instinct as a man, who has sort of, sometimes even not negative, but who has courage, who is not coward, is to punch him back. But I could say to myself, what if I refrain? How would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala look at this positively? Would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward me from restraining myself? Let me see why he punched me. Let me see why he spoke ill of me. Let me see why he gossiped about me. And let me not just reciprocate, because that would be my natural instinct, to reciprocate. No, I'm not going to reciprocate. I'm going to listen to da'i al-aql wa deen, to the caller of the aql, reason, and the deen, and not listen to the caller of natural instincts, tab'a and shahwa, and desires. Yes.
It is natural for people to have an inclination towards their desires, but common sense and their religious motive should limit that inclination. The two forces are at war. Sometimes reason and religion win, and sometimes whims and desires prevail. The battlefield is the heart of man. Patience has many other names according to the situation. If patience consists of restraining sexual desire, it is called honor. The opposite...
No, it is called the iffa. And iffa would be chastity. So patience has many, many, many names. And we will see. All of the good virtues, they have a root in patience. They are rooted in patience. All of the good virtues, yes. So to restrain from sexual impropriety, that is called what? Iffa. Iffa is chastity. Iffa is a good character, yes.
The opposite of which is adultery and promiscuity. If it consists of controlling one's stomach, it is called self-control.
It is shiba'un nafs, which is the satiety of the self. The opposite of which is basically greed for food.
If it consists of controlling one's stomach, it is called self-control. Shiba'un nafs. The opposite of which is greed. If it consists of keeping quiet about that which is not fit to disclose, it is called discretion.
Kitman was-sirr. It is basically to keep the secret private.
The opposite of which is disclosing secrets, lying, slander, or libel. If it consists of being content with that is sufficient for one's needs, it's called abstemiousness,
which is zuhd. Zuhd, we don't need to translate zuhd, right? Everybody knows zuhd. Or do we need to translate zuhd? Zuhd? Because zuhd is a very complicated concept to translate. Zuhd basically is to stay away from all excesses, extras. It is disdain for the dunya. It is basically losing interest in all of the excesses of the dunya. Having no interest or losing your interest in all of the excesses of the dunya. Taqwa and zuhd are not the same. Taqwa is basically to be God conscious. Taqwa has to do with self-restraint for the fear for your fear from God, or out of fear from God. But zuhd is this interest in the dunya, this interest in the pleasures of the dunya.
Like more and more.
Yeah. So basically, to eat more than your need, that is excess, but that is not haram. So you're not muttaqi if you eat like dessert after your food. But zuhd is even to give that up. So there is zuhd is to give up all excesses of everything, eating, drinking, residence, car, to give up all forms of luxury in life because you're disinterested in life. It's like when Abu Dharr al-Ghifari used to have no furniture at his home, and someone visited him, and he said to him, where is your furniture? And he said that we have a different home that we send our furniture to on regular basis. And so the man said, but as long as you live here, you need to have furniture here. متاع ترتفق به. So Abu Dharr al-Ghifari said to him, but the landlord will not leave us here. So the landlord will kick us out at any time. So it is basically to have this interest in dunya. كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب أو عابر سبيل. That is the manifestation of zuhd, to be in this dunya as a traveler or a stranger. Yeah.
If it consists of controlling one's anger, then it is called forbearance.
Hilm.
The opposite of which is impulsiveness and hasty reaction. If it consists of refraining from haste, then it is called gracefulness and steadiness.
Waqar. And waqar would be composure. Yeah.
The opposite of which is to be hot-headed. If it consists of refraining from running away, then it is called courage. The opposite of which is cowardice. If it consists of refraining from taking revenge, then it is called forgiveness. The opposite of which is revenge.
الصفح والمغفرة is forgiveness.
If it consists of refraining from being stingy, then it is called generosity. The opposite of which is miserliness.
الجود والكرم, generosity. So you see that patience here is everything. So chastity, courage, forbearance, shaja'a, عفة, حلم, وقار, ثبات, كتمان السر, الصفح والمغفرة. All of these great qualities are rooted in patience.
If it consists of refraining from being lazy and helpless, then it is called dynamism and initiative.
It is al-kays. Al-kays is competency.
If it consists of refraining from blaming and accusing other people, then it is called chivalry. Mura'a.
Yeah, it is. That is not a good translation. It is not about refraining from blaming other people. It is actually in Arabic. It is وإن كان عن داعي إلقاء الكل على الناس وعدم حمل كلهم. It is to refrain from throwing your burden on the people and not carrying their burden. So, some people throw their burden on the people, but whenever people have a burden, they refuse to share it with them. And so, so that is not muru'ah. It is opposite to muru'ah. Muru'ah is when you hasten to helping the people when they have a burden, you carry it with them, whatever burden, it's not necessarily a physical burden, any burden. You help them out with it, you carry it with them, but you have a burden. When you have a burden of your own, you try to carry it yourself, by yourself. That is tamamul muru'ah. That is complete muru'ah, and muru'ah would be translated best as integrity, for the lack of a better word.
Different names may be applied to patience in different situations, but all are covered by the idea of patience. This shows that Islam in its totality is based on patience. Is it possible to obtain the quality of patience? If a person does not naturally possess the characteristic of patience, he can attain this characteristic by acting as if he does possess it, until it eventually becomes second nature. This is what the Prophet ﷺ has told us in the hadith. Whoever tries to be patient, then Allah will help him to be patient.
إنما الصبر بالتصبر.
A person can also try...
This hadith is reported by Bukhari and Muslim from Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu. إنما الصبر بالتصبر. And there is, the scholars disagree. Some people said that الطبع يغلب التطبع, that the natural instincts, the natural inclination or indisposition will overpower your effort, your effort in changing your natural inclination. Sometimes the natural inclination resurfaces every once in a while, but generally speaking, your effort at change will overpower the natural inclination. We're told this by Allah and His Messenger, that because otherwise there would be no hope in change. And human beings would not have the tools to seek completeness and to seek perfection and to seek excellence, and all of these things are goals that human beings were demanded, to seek, whether emphatically or less emphatically. They are demanded to seek ihsan, excellence, and if we cannot change ourselves, then no one will be able to do that, and Allah does not burden us beyond its capacity. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. So there is a very beautiful hadith that is reported by Ibn Abi Dunya and Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi in his book Al-Tarikh from Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, إنما العلم بالتحلم إنما العلم بالتعلم والحلم بالتحلم ومن يتحرى الخير يعطى ومن يتق الشر يوقى. إنما العلم بالتعلم, verily becoming knowledgeable, or the acquisition of knowledge, is through learning. Acquisition of knowledge is through learning. وَالْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, hilm, forbearance, is through tahallum. Tahallum is what? Practice of forbearance. Is through practice of forbearance. To try to act like you are forbearing. To try to act like you're forbearing. This is not acting that is dispraised. This is acting so that you may attain the quality of forbearance. You're usually short-fused, hot-headed. You usually have a bad temper. But you say to yourself, I will, try to control myself and try to act forbearing until you become forbearing, you become halim. And the beauty of this is like another manifestation of how the Prophet ﷺ was given Jawami' al-Kalim. Jawami' al-Kalim, the most comprehensive yet concise speech. Comprehensive and concise speech. Because al-ilm bil-ta'allum wal-hilm bil-tahallum, this is not just a rhyme. Because the Prophet was never bound by rhymes. The Quran does never binds itself to rhymes. This is the shi'r that the Prophet ﷺ was deemed above it. And the Prophet was deemed above poetry. Because the meanings are more important than the form. And the Prophet would never bind himself to rhymes. But it rhymes, despite that it does rhyme. But the reason why the Prophet put al-ilm and al-hilm together is that al-ilm, which is what he started with, this is by agreement of all people, attainable through learning, right? All sane people will tell you, yes, people learn, acquire knowledge through learning, and that is doable. But many people will say forbearance is a natural inclination or indisposition that cannot be attained unless you were granted forbearance, naturally by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet told them, as much as ilm can be acquired through learning, hilm can be acquired through practice, بالتحلم. وَمَنْ يَتَحَرَّ الْخَيْرَ يُعْطَى, and he who seeks good will be given good. وَمَنْ يَتَوَقَّ الشَّرَّ يُوقَى أو يَتَّقِ الشَّرَّ يُوقَى, and whoever avoids evil will be spared evil. Yes.
A person can also strive to control his sexual desire and lower his gaze until these two become second nature. The same applies to all other desirable characteristics such as steadiness, generosity, and courage.
Everything is acquired through practice. Everything, every good quality is acquired through practice. And patience, becoming more patient, is acquired by tasabbur, practice of patience. To practice patience. Take it one step at a time, in small increments, because the Prophet said, أَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ أَوْ مَا دَامَ وَإِنْ قَلَّ. The best, most beloved deeds by Allah are those that are consistent even if they were little. So take this matter, in small increments until you reach your goal of becoming patient and forbearing. Sabur wa halim. Patient and forbearing. That's it. That's the end of that part. Inshallah, next time we will go over the different perspectives on patience and the 5 categories of patience and other things. Inshallah.